Hello, everyone. With me today is a gentleman I admire, though he may not be front and center as Mr. Matt Zoller Seitz is likely someone you've read, but maybe not seen. He's the editor-at-large for RogerEbert.com. He's a TV critic for New York Magazine, Vulture, if you know Vulture. He's authored many books on film and television. On top of those endeavors, he still finds time to curate and manage an online bookstore, which specializes in books about film and television. I'll show you two of my favorites. Well, one of them fell, but I'll show you one of my favorites. It's this one, The Mad Men Carousel. Fantastic. If you're a fan of Mad Men, or if you've never watched Mad Men, this is for you. You can start Mad Men. Each chapter covers an episode and adds a lot more than that. It's a lovely book, too. Go buy that. And that site is mzspress.com. That's all one word.
Sorry, it's actually mzs.press.
Is it .press? Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Order those books. Get a copy of Mad Men Carousel. Get a copy of the Deadwood Bible while you can. That's Matt's, one of his other books, which I'm so glad I jumped on that one early. The Bible version. It looks like a real Bible. Matt, I'm honored to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
Because not only do I respect and often agree with your reviews, but your writing comes with intelligence and depth about the topics, and not just about the medium of TV or film. There's an emotional intelligence there, on top of, if I may add a third element, some really fine writing. I teach English as a side hustle. And
I bet you're rolling in dough.
Yes, sir. You can't imagine. On a syntactical level, your sentences flourish. They stand out on the page. It's just not your usual film and TV critic writing.
Oh,
and
thank
I enjoy
you.
it. Yeah, I enjoy reading it. And so it's nice to have you pick your brain a little, maybe even.
Sure.
And your writing, of course, always has insight about the movie, about the show. But just on a sentence level, I think it's well done. It's well paced. It's well written always. And I'll add this while we're on the topic. I also host a TV and streaming mainly podcast with a couple of friends, like everyone else on the planet. But my podcast is with two friends, and it started from a direct inspiration from you and your work when I first heard you on the Vulture TV podcast.
Oh,
that's right.
That's great.
When it ended, not only were my wife and I were disappointed due to how much we learned from it and listened to it every week, but I was also motivated to try it on myself. In the vein of what you and Jen Chaney had made there.
And that's great. I'll tell Jen you said that. That's really nice.
Please do.
Yeah.
So good. We were just, I wouldn't say devastated, but we were sad. We thought, oh, no, not the Vulture TV podcast, the best one.
We were sad, too. We were very proud of our work there.
You should be. So I made myself quickly familiar with your writing and your presence online shortly after discovering that podcast. And then once it ended, I thought, well, I like that. I like that version of what they did. Can I do it myself? I'll try.
That's great.
Donovan, one of our co-hosts, stated to me last night in a text message that, and I'll quote him, your review of Cronenberg's latest was utterly fantastic and an exemplar of what popular criticism can be and should be.
Oh, my God. Thank you. Jeez,
and here's the thing. Neither he nor I have seen the movie yet, but we both read the review because it was so good.
Oh, thank you.
So
thank you. That movie meant a lot to me. That's definitely on my top 10 for this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I really do need to check it out now. So we'll get into some conversational related things. I see your social media usage as a love and hate relationship.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Not, although less hate since I got off Twitter. That was a very aggravating place, but I'm on Blue Sky now.
Yes.
And that's a little more my speed.
Yeah.
Seems like there's more verifiably real human beings on there.
So true.
You know, fewer bots. And more bang for your buck. My partner Judith and I got to shout out Judith here.
Mm-hmm.
Judith really runs the store, and we curated together, but a lot of the most popular items in there are things that she chose. I got to give credit where credit is due, but we really love having the store and working on it together, and we talk about it. We'll sit around and have discussions about what about this book, what about that book, and it really is just a mom and pop operation. That's really important to me.
So there is a certain curation to your store. It's not just another Amazon or Barnes.
No,
It
no,
is
no.
Yeah, you guys pick and choose.
It's film and television and music. It's arts. We call it the arts bookstore of the internet.
Yeah.
And everything, not everything in there is a book about the arts, but everything is somehow arts related. Like we have a disability section, and that one is very heavy on books about disability in the arts. And we have sections on identity, LGBTQA, African American, Asian Pacific Islander, Latino, but that's also focused on the arts. So we have a lot of used books. I think it's important to have a lot of used books that are inexpensive so that people, people, they think they can't afford a book. They look at it and go, oh God, that's only $5. I'll get it. When I was in college, I had 3 jobs at one point at the same time. And one of them was I did work study a few hours a week at the Southwest Film and Video Archives at Southern Methodist University, which is where I went to school. And I was assistant to the chief archivist and the founder of the archives, a guy named G. William Jones, Bill Jones. He died a long time ago, but a wonderful, wonderful man. And I was his projectionist for his classes. As I was doing that, I was also working at the SMU bookstore and working at the Inwood Theater, which is an art house theater in Dallas. So my life really did revolve around film and books. I've always been a voracious reader and a voracious viewer. My life has really been dedicated to that with very few exceptions. I mean, that's what I live and breathe. I'm not very well suited to do very much else. So I hope, and I'm pleased that I've continued to be able to do this as long as I have. It's not always been easy. You mentioned a side hustle. I've got like 6,
Yeah.
I taught class for a while at Syracuse as well. And, there was a television festival that I was the host and co-founder of in New York called Split Screens. I don't know that I've ever really been focused on only one thing. That's my life. And I really appreciate everything that you said, particularly about the writing, because I think I do put a lot of care into the words and the structure of the sentences and the flow. Like I want it to be fun, literally fun to read, like the way your eye interacts with the text. I want it to be interesting and surprising sometimes. Like you don't know, where is the sentence going? My God, it's 8 lines long, But hopefully when you get to the end of it, you go, okay, I get it. I see what he was going for here.
I tell my students, readers know how to write, and being a voracious reader doesn't hurt.
That's very true. When I studied fiction in college, there was this incredible experience. This guy named C.W. Smith, who's a very fine novelist, and he's still with us. He turned 80 recently, lives in Dallas. And Charlie used to give me books to read. Like he really took an interest in my writing when I was like 19, the first time I took one of his classes. And it's funny, I go back, I saved most of the short stories I wrote for Charlie's classes. And it's funny, it's like I can read them and go, oh, that's when he introduced me to Don DeLillo. Or, oh, that's when he introduced me to Raymond Carver. It's like I was, what's that thing they say, milk absorbs the flavor of whatever's sitting with it in the refrigerator.
Oh, right.
That's kind of what it was like. It was like, this week I'm going to try to be Faulkner,
Oh, wow.
I had a Stephen King phase, and there was a lot of, shards of bone leapt in the air and that kind of stuff, but it's a fun exercise.
Yes. That reminds me of my time with Dr. Don Noble at the University of Alabama. Now, I ran into Don recently, and he didn't remember me as a student because I was not a standout student. But anytime he would bring up Faulkner, Fitzgerald, he walked us through the big 3 there, also with Hemingway. And I could recognize it even in my note taking. And I'm like you, I kept all that stuff. They're in files up at the high school right now.
Yeah.
and desk drawers.
Yeah, there's not too many works of fiction that I wrote back then that I would show to anyone now as an example of quality, but it's kind of an interesting snapshot into the mind of a semi-talented young writer in the 80s and 90s. I love what I do, and it's not always easy to do it. And I think a lot about my late father, who was a jazz composer and musician in Dallas, named Dave Zoller. And my dad was a musician. That was his job for his entire life, and he lived to be 78. He was almost 79 when he died. He always was a musician. There was never a time when he had to stop being a musician, and there were times when he struggled, and I saw him struggling, but he was able to eke out a precarious living doing that, even after the 90s when synthesizers came in and a lot of the work of studio musicians vanished.
Mm-hmm.
And something like that is happening now in other fields, but somehow he managed to keep going. He left a great legacy. I hope it will be discovered in the future. I shot a film during the final year of his life as he was recording his final jazz album.
Wow.
And we recorded it at the Texas Theater in Dallas, which is where they apprehended Lee Harvey Oswald.
Wow.
We were able to get it because it was shut down during the pandemic. So we were able to get it for a very, very low price because they weren't doing anything with it. And we recorded the album there, and we filmed the recording of the album. And I've still got to put that together. That's something that's on my list to try to do over the next 6 months to a year.
Yes.
But it's all one thing in a way. Music, film, television, poetry, fiction, playwriting. It's all a means of expression. And I think it's really important for people to appreciate art as art, not as content. I really don't like that word at all. And I think it's a way to batter creative people and people who love creative work into submission so that they are good little consumers who are eating the squirts of applesauce that are being laid down on the conveyor belt every day. And it makes us devalue as artists our own contributions and our own specialness. It's like, well, one person is no better than anybody else, no more interesting than anybody else. It doesn't matter what we serve up as long as we're serving something up. And there's entire corporations that are putting out entertainment that seem to have adopted that position. And that's I have a lot of pet hobby horses that I ride. And that's one of them, is just to say that anybody who reads me, anybody who listens to me, if you are doing anything creative or if you appreciate the work of creative people, that is a really special thing. And I would even say it's a holy thing. I think it's okay to get evangelical with an Alabama guy. But I think it's
perfectly.
I think it's blasphemous the way that corporations talk about art and entertainment. It offends me to my very core. And I didn't used to think about it in that way until about 10 years ago, I guess, maybe a little more. Obviously, art is something, you want it to reach people, and there's mechanisms for delivery, and that involves money and financial decisions and things. But you can never lose sight of the fact that there's human beings at the heart of it all, and they have a sensibility, and they made some choices. And a great work of art has a personality that is as complicated and interesting as a human.
If I may bring another point of view, very similar, but just another way of looking at it, what I see, and I hate to be the two old men talking about the younger generation, but I just see with my students, it's not that they don't value art. They don't understand that you should probably pay for it. They think that everything's been free for them when it comes to music and movies because of YouTube, as we're on right now, and because of, it started with Napster long before they were born. But
yes.
And then it became Spotify. And I'm not trying to speak for all of them, but there is this consensus that you pay your fee for Spotify and that's what you get. And my goodness, everything should be on Spotify and Netflix and YouTube.
Right. Right.
It's not their fault. It's just what it's what they've seen and learned.
Yeah. Well, the complicating factor in that is that I was thinking about this the other day, when I was coming up, I heard music on the radio, and if it was somebody I liked, I would go buy a cassette. an album, a record, and play it over and over. And there didn't used to be home video, but there was when we were coming up. And we'd rent videos or buy them if they were affordable and watch them over and over. And there were also people tape things off of TV and stuff. And
Oh, yeah.
And there are two things I think that are important about that. One is that there was a system in place to pay the artist something, and it was more than what they are getting now. And there's a lot of musicians, for example, who post their Spotify checks online because they're so kind of disgustingly small.
Yes.
Like they get a check for $1.12 for like 10 million views or something. And
Right.
the thing is, the economy was healthier back then, and the minimum wage has not really risen in relation to inflation since like 1981 or something. At the same time, there's all these other expenses that we didn't used to have. Like we didn't have to use to pay for internet access, and you kind of can't survive without a mobile device now.
True.
So many things are driven by apps, so that's another monthly expense, and everything's just more expensive. So I understand why people say, I can't afford to buy a bunch of records or something. I get that, and I deal with that myself.
Yeah.
I think there's got to be a better way to do it, though, than the wholesale theft of labor by corporations, which is what's going on now. It's like, why should Spotify make all the money for art that people made? The record labels back in the day were robber bandits also, but at least they were giving advances to artists and new artists and discovering new talent. Like there was such a thing as a scout who would go around to clubs and see if there was anybody interesting out there. It sucked and it was corrupt in a lot of ways, but it was a lot better than what we have now for the artist. I think it's probably better for the executives and the shareholders,
Yes.
but it's worse for the artist.
And there were contracts.
Yes.
There's no contract with Spotify. You just put it up there and you get what you get.
No, I discovered a film that I wrote and directed one time. I discovered it on a streaming service, which about 4 or 5 years ago, and I don't want to get into it, but basically I managed to get in touch with somebody there and going, okay, so do I get paid for this? And they said, no, this was part of a package of films that we bought from a DVD distributor, and one of them was your movie. And I was thinking, I don't remember signing an agreement saying you could do that, but whatever. It's not like I'd be Scrooge McDuck diving through a pile of gold coins if I got paid for this little independent film. But still, it's a little glimpse of like the world we live in.
Yeah. Where's my $10?
Right, exactly. Where's my $10? I could get an Egg McMuffin and a hash brown.
Exactly.
That,
I mentioned social media, and the reason why is because I think that you and I are on the same wavelength there. I just can't stand it, but at the same time, I'm on it.
Right.
What do you think devolves what could be such useful medium?
Well, I think it's the medium itself that degrades the discourse. One of the unfortunate truths of communication in the online era is that extremes are what drive traffic, and traffic is what ultimately results in monetization and hopefully profit. So, that's why there's no percentage, there's no value if you're a publisher in a review of something that's like, well, this has some good things and some bad things. This performance is really, really excellent, but the script is terrible. They tell you people don't want to read that. I don't think that's true. But the thinking is, if you go, this is the worst movie that has ever been pooped out by the rhinoceros of the entertainment industry, you get more clicks. And the blistering, flesh-shredding takedowns get a lot of traffic, and the raves get traffic. And the good old-fashioned middle-of-the-road evaluation, which is what I prefer, is harder to sell. It's really, really hard. I think that's unfortunate. But I do think there's a lot of very helpful signs. Like, I don't want to be doom and gloom here. I will say that, YouTube, I have encountered and in some cases begun, kind of online relationships with artists who I've encountered on YouTube, who are just making stuff for almost no money.
Yes.
And I say this over and over, and it's true. You don't need a lot of money to make a great work of expressive art. You just don't. And distribution is the problem. But actually making the thing is increasingly affordable. And this phone that we curse at the same time that we are depend on it.
Yeah.
This thing has, I have an old phone, and it has 4,000 lines of resolution. And that's 10 times as much as the video camera that I owned 20 years ago had.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing is better quality than any camera I've ever owned in my life in terms of resolution.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. The same thing with, this thing is like an information gathering device. Like I'll actually record live sound sometimes. Like if I'm in an airport, I'll run like a minute or 2 minutes of sound because it's cool. It's interesting, the sound of the airport. And I think, and you hear, especially if it's an international terminal, you hear different languages being spoken. It's like, I could maybe use this. I've done recordings of what it sounds like in my dad's backyard or what it sounds like in the West Village in New York. I don't know if or when I'm ever going to use this stuff, but it's pretty darn cool that I can do it. I could just push a button and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. We're living in the future.
An age of miracles. I read somewhere that the iPhone, just a simple iPhone, has more computing power than the computers that guided the astronauts to the moon.
I've seen something like that. Yeah. That's wild.
But unfortunately, the downside is like, what are we using this incredible, miraculous technology for? It's to draw, to, get a bunch of AI slurry images of the president in compromising positions with Putin.
Yeah.
It's like a friend of mine was talking about computer animation, which, CGI, when used well with imagination, can be extraordinary, but a lot of times it's used in a very perfunctory, prefabricated way and just no imagination, like very literal minded. And a friend of mine said, it's like, imagine that you had a genie could grant you 3 wishes and you asked for like a toaster, a ballpoint pen, and a pair of shoes. Like our standards are really low,
Yeah.
This is off on a tangent, but the 2 most interesting directors in terms of their use of CGI are David Fincher and Steven Spielberg. And Spielberg, the opening shot of West Side Story really lets you feel what it was like in the neighborhood that Lincoln Center is now in. It's astounding how physically tactile, real it feels.
Mm-hmm.
And that was almost all done with computers. And Fincher, like there's stuff like I think starting with Zodiac, there's a lot of stuff that you go, oh, how did they spend all that money to recreate San Francisco in 1971? It's like they didn't.
Right.
They did like 20% of what you see in the shot, and the rest of it was created later,
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Fincher's great, though.
Yeah.
I am curious. It's impossible to answer. It's a silly question. Do you have a favorite movie?
No, I mean, it changes.
No.
I don't really have a favorite movie. It's like, that's just not something I have an answer for.
I understand.
I have certain movies that I've seen so many times that I just know them. Like All That Jazz, 2001, A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
On the Waterfront, Hard Boiled, The New World, Days of Heaven, A Hidden Life. Those are 3 Terrence Malick films. He's one of my favorites. About probably most of Spielberg's filmography I've seen a zillion times. Probably seen Do the Right Thing 40 times or something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
There's a lot of things I revisit, and sometimes in pieces. Like sometimes that's another great thing about technology is you can, the downside, one of the downsides of YouTube is almost everything on there that's not made by a person is stolen. But the upside is you can look up like one action scene from a John Woo film made in 1988, and it's probably on there.
Yeah.
It's like the Great Library of Alexandria, but it's virtual.
That's true. Yeah, for the good and the bad of it.
Yeah.
For anyone curious where to start with Matt's writing, I did mention the book Mad Men Carousel. Matt doesn't do anything half-ass. It's simply fun to look at. If you're not a fan of Mad Men, again, visit his site, mzs.press.com. I've got it right there. His work with Alan Sepinwall is also really good. TV The Book was an entertaining read. That's a pretty wide open book for anyone who likes television. And The Sopranos Session are 2 of my favorites from you guys as a duo.
Yeah, we wrote together for over a decade at the Star Ledger in New Jersey, and Alan is still probably one of the best collaborators I've ever had. Like, it's almost eerie how well we worked together. It was to the point where in the Sopranos sessions, like, there were certain things that I knew he was better at than me, and some things I was better at than him. And in the recap section, like, I would write like 3/4 of one of the recaps, and then there would be a section where it's like, Alan, this is where you do your thing.
Yeah, okay.
Like, it's that level of comfort.
That's really cool. And I'm a fan of Alan too.
Yeah, Alan's great. He's writing a Rod Serling biography right now, and I can't wait to read that.
That's cool. For those young people watching, that's the Twilight Zone creator.
Yes, without whom, M. Night Shyamalan, Jordan Peele, Sam Esmail. I mean, yeah, it's like a lot of stuff just wouldn't exist without Rod Serling. A lot of careers wouldn't exist without Rod Serling.
That's true.
And I'm pleased to see that show has proven durable.
Yeah. I'll go back and watch those old episodes, and they're just fascinating and timely still to the day.
Unfortunately, in some cases.
That's true. Is there any one thing you wish mass audiences knew about critiquing movies and television?
Yeah. One is that I have known a lot of people who have written criticism of various kinds over the course of my life, and I've never met a single one of them who wants to tear something down. And I think there's some confusion about what the word criticism means.
Okay.
There's different meanings. There's different ways you can use the word criticism. One is to say, I have one criticism of your wardrobe, Matt, and it's that it sucks. That's a criticism. But also criticism is an evaluative practice. It is assessing a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that means praising the things that are good. And honestly, good and bad are not hugely interesting to me, and it's very rare that I see a movie that I think is just totally bad in every way. Usually there's some redeeming feature in it. And even in a really great movie, there's things that I think are not good. There's aspects of some of my favorite directors that I think are not good, but the totality is so impressive that I'm willing to, if not give it a pass, but at least kind of factor it in. Like, nobody's perfect. No person is perfect. No work of art is perfect. And that's okay. I think we set ourselves up not just for disappointment, but also for being manipulated when we, see people and works of art as wholly good or wholly bad. There are some people who are just plain evil, and that kind of outweighs whatever individual good qualities. Like he loves his wife, or he's nice to his dog. Okay, well, he's a mass murderer. Like, I'm obviously not talking about that, but I mean just regular everyday stuff. My stepfather was a violent and in some ways intolerant man, but he loved books and reading, and he had great taste in movies. And a lot of the directors that I admire, he introduced me to. And there's a lot of people in my family and people I've known growing up where I could say that. It's like, in certain ways, they were kind of terrible, and in other ways, wow, I'm the person I am today because of them.
You reminded me of something just then that it's also another thing I've taken from you, borrowed from you, if I may. One of our podcast goals is to be, the only way we've learned to phrase it is to say it's the working man's TV podcast.
Right.
And which is to say, we know that just because you work in sanitation doesn't mean you don't love an analytical dissection of Deadwood, or just be, your job doesn't dictate your knowledge.
Yeah, one of my best friends is a retired UPS worker who just recommended a biography of William Blake to me. It's like people defy all, like anybody is capable of being interested in pretty high level stuff and processing it. I'll never forget this time. It was about 15 years ago or something. I was living in a railroad apartment in Brooklyn over a jazz bar with my 2 kids. And there was this guy named Dean who was, he had some kind of mental issue. I never quite figured out what it was, and I'm not sure he ever got a diagnosis. But he was a very, very sweet guy, but he couldn't really function like in everyday life and hold down a job and that stuff. But he was a very sweet guy. And he used to come over to our apartment. He'd just ring the buzzer, and my kids loved him. And we'd have him in for dinner. And if we were watching a movie, he'd sit there and watch the movie with us. He was an artist, and he made these incredible sculptures out of everyday materials like, gaffer's tape and aluminum foil and garbage twist ties and things. He could make this incredibly realistic gazelle out of garbage ties. It was incredible. And I showed him, there were two movies I showed him that really made an impression on him. One was The New World. He'd never seen a Terrence Malick film, so I showed him The New World, and he loved it. And he was a very religious guy. We talked a lot about God and the Bible in relation to that movie. And then another one I showed him was 28 Days Later, the original one. And and at a certain point in the movie where they're kind of moving through the countryside and they're showing you what it looks like after this zombie apocalypse, it's still very beautiful, even though things are in ruins. And Dean says, this reminds me of that other movie we watched, The New World. And I'm like, really?
Oh.
Yeah, and he was thinking there was something about the quality of the color and the image. This is not a guy who went to art school.
Right.
I think anybody can appreciate art in a deeper way. And I'm not writing for my peers. I'm not writing for people who've seen 10,000 movies and 12 books, or a professor at a college or something. I'm writing for people who have a job that's totally unrelated to the arts, but love movies or love TV, and who know a lot, who know a lot more than they think they know.
Right. That's such a good point. That's a goal of ours, or of mine for sure. I was specifically reminded of, and I think it was you, wasn't it your grandfather who was a farmer but also loved the opera, or would come home and listen to these records that had such depth?
Well, there were two stories I think maybe you're combining, but one of them is
Okay.
my maternal grandfather loved to read, mostly nonfiction, but also the Bible. And he was an atheist, but he read the Bible. But he read the Bible because almost everybody else in our family was very church-going, very conversant in the Bible. And he actually knew the Bible better than anyone in our family, except for an uncle who was a pastor. Then also my Uncle Rod, this is another example of, you got to take the good with the bad. My Uncle Rod, my stepfather's brother, was a Dallas police officer, and he was not a very good guy in terms of his job. I'm not aware that he was like a person who brutalized people, but he definitely didn't no cop is going to testify against another cop. And I knew there were some things that he knew about that he never would stand up for what was right. And that disturbed me. But he's the guy who loved the opera, and he taught the Dallas Police Department had a choir, and he was the director of it. And he went to Juilliard. He studied music at Juilliard, and he loved art films. And he used to go to the art house cinema that was near the college. He'd come back and say, "You ever seen a movie by this guy, Eric Rohmer?" And I'm like, "No, I'm 12. Why would I have seen that?" He turned me on to Excalibur. He came back from Excalibur. It's like, "You got to see this. It's amazing." It's like, it's rated R. I can't go, I eventually snuck into it. Yeah.
Well, people are complex.
They sure are.
And a recognition of that is, I think, helpful in just day-to-day life.
Absolutely. One gateway into a more sort of analytical, wide-ranging view of art is songs.
Mm-hmm.
Songs, and listening to songs and listening to lyrics of songs and thinking about what they're actually doing. In fact, I think I've written about this. My mother, who was also a musician, voice teacher and songwriter and singer, we would listen to records together, and she would talk about the songs.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about voice from what she said. And she would point out, like, for example, what you call a story song.
Mm-hmm.
And country music was always particularly good at this, where there's three or four verses and some choruses in the middle, but it tells you a complete story. And the ending is a surprise in some way. And also there's music where the narrator is not the singer. Uh-huh. Not the singer at all. And sometimes they're taking the point of view of an abhorrent person, and I think Randy Newman is one of the best at that.
Yes.
Randy Newman's written songs from the point of view of slave ship owners, racists, homicidal maniacs, and an angry, indifferent God.
Uh-huh.
And you're not supposed to listen to this and go, "Oh, Randy Newman personally believes all this." It's
That's
like
right.
he's an actor inhabiting a character.
Yeah. There's that connection again. Much of your learning, I suppose, started with movies. It, how much of your thoughts and thinking about movies carry over to analyzing television? And where does it begin and end for you?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, a lot. I'm
Okay.
aware of the differences. And so we're talking about scripted TV.
Yes.
The differences. There's differences in intent in a
Mhm.
series, and I have to say here that I do think there's been a decline in craft in television series in the streaming era. A lot of series don't know how to be a proper television series.
Mhm.
And there's a joke. I can't remember who made it. I would love to give them credit, but I'm just going to make something up here. But there's a story about a surfing dog. You know, it's like, oh, a TV show about a surfing dog. And like it's 10 episodes of the dog not surfing. And then in the last 10 minutes of season 1, he gets on the surfboard.
Right.
You know, that's a lot of
That
these
is
streaming shows are like that. You know, Perry Mason, the HBO version of Perry Mason. I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
when does he go into court? What's going on? You know, television is a long form story. It's open ended, and some of them are self contained. Like each episode stands on its own. Others are long form serialized tales, and some split the difference. Like with The Sopranos is a great example of that.
Mhm.
Like every season tells an ongoing story, but each individual episode is kind of like this perfectly shaped object.
Right.
A movie is self-contained. It should be, and even if it's in a series like the Alien films,
Mhm.
you know, the Alien films, there's a continuity of theme and look and some of the concepts, but every Alien movie is different. Prometheus is nothing like the original Alien, which is nothing like Alien Resurrection, and that's okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but in terms of how the information is conveyed, I don't see a whole lot of difference. Except that television, with some exceptions, has been more driven by the word than by the image. And there are some exceptions to that, some pretty glorious exceptions like Twin Peaks and Miami Vice. And I mentioned The Sopranos, a lot of the stuff from the late 90s through the early aughts that was kind of a golden age for drama looked good and sounded good in addition to having good writing. But cinema has to be more of a visual language, and it also has to be compact. And you can't spend like 10 minutes on some conversation that doesn't relate to the plot or the theme. People don't like that. Although when you can, it's pretty cool. Like sometimes rules are made to be broken. Richard Linklater's first film, Slacker, has no plot. It's a series of scenes that are interconnected geographically. Like somebody will walk out of a restaurant and the camera follows them and another person crosses them on the sidewalk and the camera follows that person now.
Right.
So there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat. But I like thinking about the properties of different media. And I should qualify here, just in case anybody who makes TV is listening. Like when I say that the quality of TV has declined, most of that's not on you guys. It's just not. I mean, a lot of it's the industry, and it's really made it impossible to practice proper series TV in the United States. When you're doing 10 episodes of a show, and then they make you wait 2 years to give you a green light to do 10 more. And people can't remember what happened in season 1. And maybe they've forgotten that it exists and the audience is smaller for the second year and then they cancel the show. There's no way to run a railroad.
That's right. Did you enjoy The Pit by chance? Which is
I still haven't watched The Pit. But I love Noah Wyle, and I love the idea that he's the guy who played John Carter on ER, who was kind of the newbie and the audience surrogate, is now like the grizzled veteran. I think that's a great idea. And
he does it well. Does both well.
Yeah, he's really, really a sharp guy too. I ran into him in the lobby of a building in LA one time, and we started talking. I'd interviewed him when I was a TV critic, and we hadn't spoken in like 15 years or something. And he's a guy who likes to talk about art.
Yeah.
You know, like we got in a conversation about some double bill at Quentin Tarantino's theater. And that's also something that impresses me is a lot of people in the industry don't watch movies. They don't watch TV. I'm consistently kind of shocked and appalled by that, like, what's on TV right now that you like? I'll ask that to a showrunner, and they're like, well, I don't really watch TV.
That's
Like, and I understand that you have a day job that's very demanding and
uh-huh.
takes a lot of hours of your life, but what do you mean you don't watch TV? Do you think that's really wise?
Yeah. I would not have fathomed that.
You should be feeding your brain. David Chase, you mentioned the Sopranos sessions. I've gotten to know David pretty well. And he goes to the movies. He goes to the movies. He'll, when we talk, he'll say, like, I remember we had a long conversation about Oppenheimer, which I loved, and he didn't like. He didn't like it. I was like, really? You don't like it? I would have thought that movie was right up your alley. And he said he thought that the moral obscenity of the atomic bomb was something that should have been at the center of focus in the movie. And he thought the movie was kind of abdicating its moral responsibility, which I thought was really a fascinating take. I'm not sure I really agree with it, but like, everybody's allowed to have their own reaction.
Yeah. That is a
and
fascinating
it made me think. Sometimes things I don't agree with make me think about a work more deeply. Like, one of my favorite examples is Roger Ebert didn't like Blue Velvet.
Yeah.
And specifically, he felt that it was needlessly cruel. And also he felt like it didn't really pay the respects to Isabella Rossellini's performance that it should have. And especially the scene where she emerges from the bushes naked. And he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but he just didn't feel like that moment was earned. He didn't feel like it was earned by the movie. And it's like, when you put your leading lady on display in that way, the movie, there better be a good reason for it. And he didn't feel like the movie had one. And I don't agree with that. But I've thought about it ever since I read that review. And every time that scene comes up, I have Roger's voice in my head. I'm going, did he really earn this?
Yeah. You taught me something, and it may have been Roger Ebert who passed it on to you, and it's something I try, which is when you look at a show or film, you think three things in order to do it justice, which is, number one, what was it trying to do? Yeah. Number two, was it successful at that? And number three, was it all worth it? Am I getting that still correct?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I think the most important part of that is the first thing. It's like, what is the movie, to the best of your ability to assess these sorts of things, what is the movie trying to do? What is it trying to be? And if the movie, to use the food analogy, like it's trying to be a delicate souffle and that with a very complex ingredients and texture, and it falls flat, well, then, it didn't succeed. If it's trying to be a hot dog, and it's the best damn hot dog you've ever had, then it succeeded. And you can't dock it points because it's a hot dog rather than a souffle.
Yeah.
And that's why Roger, somewhat notoriously for some of his peers, like Roger would give 4 stars to a movie like Lethal Weapon. He said it was like, his example was, he said it was a great example of what he calls a bruised forearm movie, where like if you go to see the movie with your date, it's so exciting that like the force of them gripping your forearm will leave a bruise.
Yeah.
And he'd give 4 stars to a very subtle, intellectually challenging, formally unconventional Japanese film. And he'd give 4 stars to the Invasion of the Bee Girls or something, and that's cool. That's cool. My number one movie a couple of years ago was Silent Night, the John Woo film. American film. It's a vigilante movie. And it's basically like, imagine imagine someone made an opera based on Death Wish. That's what it felt like to me. Like, it's such a beautiful, extraordinary film. I think it's one of his best movies. And like, the material is so cliched and retrograde, but like this unbelievable depth of feeling comes out of it. Like, you really feel like you're seeing souls in torment because of the violence that they've suffered, And that happens. Sometimes that happens when I'm watching a movie where it's like, I think it's going to be a really simple, even kind of dumb sort of movie. And all of a sudden I'm just floored by the feeling in it, the technique in it.
We had a similar moment in our discussion on our podcast where we were going through Department Q from Netflix, and we first came to it because we'd heard, usually we go by headlines. We say, this is getting good reviews. Let's add it to our Q and maybe get around to talking about it, which is what we did with Department Q. And yeah, a couple episodes in, we decided, oh, wait, it's not trying to be prestige TV, if you'll forgive the phrase. It just wants to be a crime thriller. And it's doing that exceptionally well, we thought.
Yeah, well, an example more recently for me was James Gunn, the series he did for Max called Creature Commandos, which I thought was brilliant. Absolutely one of the best things I saw in television or film that year. And imagine, like, do you remember The Untouchables?
I do.
Brian De Palma. Okay, so you remember the feeling that The Untouchables had, where it just felt so grand, just kind of magnificent, and like it really went for the big, simple emotions. That's what that series does. There's 3, 4, maybe 5 sequences in the first season of that are just, they have that kind of over the top, go for broke emotionality that like you get from like Brian De Palma when he's really laying it on. Like when Sean Connery is shot in The Untouchables and he's crawling across the floor and a trail of blood behind him. And they're intercutting that with Al Capone at a performance of Pagliacci. It's so just extraordinarily, ridiculously big that it's just amazing. And I love it so much. You can do anything, great. You know, and the corollary of that is you can make somebody cry by playing a ukulele if you know what you're doing. And if they hate the ukulele, especially.
Exactly. Well, one of our co-hosts is a musician who's finding some success these days, and kudos to him. So it's so fun to have him on when he's not touring and to hear a musician's point of view on some of the art we're doing. Let's get into our 4 questions. Yeah. Which short takes is usually shorter, but I can't help but talk to Matt. It's such fun to talk to you, and it's an honor too. I'm learning a lot. But our 4 questions, we will begin. The first of which, I mentioned your writing. I've talked about how great it is. Let's talk a little language here. What verb best describes you?
Well, you know, I got stuck on that one.
Oh, no.
No, I did. I was thinking of verb. It usually be like an adjective.
Exactly.
I was like a verb. And I think I would have to go with C.
Okay.
SEEC.
Yeah.
That's what I am doing when I'm watching movies or television or looking at paintings or watching a dance performance. I'm seeing what's in front of me, but in a sense, I'm hoping that I'm seeing something deeper than what's in front of me.
Okay.
You know, like I'm hoping that I'm not just seeing the surface. I really want to glimpse some of the depths, and you have to open yourself up. Another friend of mine who's as big a Terrence Malick fan as I am, he went to see The New World, and we talked about it for hours. And he said his favorite scene in the movie is where Colin Farrell's character is with the Powhatans, and he falls into their arms, almost like a trust exercise, and has what seems like kind of an out-of-body experience. And my friend is a very religious guy, and he said that was his favorite scene because he said, ideally, I want to live my life according to the feeling that is in that scene. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, you have to always be open to the possibility of rapture. And I've carried that phrase in my head ever since.
Wow. We'll get to our second question, which is, it might be obvious, but what's your favorite thing to do? What was your favorite thing to do as a kid, small guy, that contributes to your life still to this day?
Playing in my sandbox in the backyard. Had a little sandbox in the backyard, and I used to build not just sandcastles and stuff, but also I had these dinosaurs and little monster action figures and things, and I would come up with these stories and play them out in the sandbox. And and one of my favorite things to do was I would reenact almost the entire plot of King Kong, the original King Kong. The native huts were acorns that were half buried in the sand, because the top of an acorn looks like the top of a hut.
Yeah, it does.
You know, and so I'd have King Kong like angrily stepping on the huts. And I saw the 1976 King Kong, which is much more graphically violent, and I thought, like, I need more violence in this. So I got red Kool-Aid, and I added just a little bit of water to make blood. And when I had Godzilla and King Kong fight in the sandbox, I put blood on them. And the thing I didn't take into account was the Kool-Aid is filled with sugar.
Yes.
So it attracted flies and
Yeah.
bees.
Oh, man. Pretty instantly?
No, it took them a while to figure out that, I was laying out a cafeteria style feast for them, But yeah, it was pretty soon. It was like, okay, my grandfather said, you got two choices here. You can either stop slathering your toys with Kool-Aid, or you can just make peace with the fact that you're going to get bitten and stung.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So creating narratives even. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember doing that with Star Wars figurines, and I would continue the story because I wanted more.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's the key to this ongoing success of Star Wars.
Yes. I recently finished Andor, and it just made me want to get back into that childhood phase again.
Yeah, that's a great show. That's a great show that in a way it kind of destroys the rest of Star Wars, because it's like, what if this series had no interest in appealing to children?
I know. So true. So question 3, what makes you feel great about yourself?
A lot of things, but probably the big one is being told that I made a positive difference in someone's life in some way, even if it's a small one. A lot of what you've said today falls into that category, and I'm really grateful to you for that, because, a lot of times when you write on a public platform, you feel like your work just goes out into a void, and you press the button to publish it. And my first thought is, gee, I hope nobody hates this and makes me the main character of the day on social media. And if that doesn't happen, I'm like, okay, success. But then sometimes something really hits and people seem to really respond to it. And that's a great pleasure.
Yeah. I'll point to your recent writing about Michael Madsen.
Oh, thank you.
It was super,
thank you.
super nice look at what a lot of people may not have seen from him or noticed about him.
Yeah, I think there's an alternate universe in which Michael Madsen had Tom Hanks's career. I'm not even kidding about that. There was a purity of emotion to that guy that was really moving to me. I think Ray Liotta had some of the same qualities. Like Ray Liotta, everybody thinks about Ray Liotta as gangsters and villains, but
yes,
I also love him as Shoeless Joe in Field of Dreams.
Oh, wow, yes. Yeah. I thought of, I guess it was his last on-screen work with Blackbird, where he was the father of the imprisoned son. He had the most touching line I think I've ever heard in TV, which is, you had no idea that the love of your life is going to be your kid.
Yeah, that's a great...
And the way he delivered it,
he's terrific. Yeah.
Our last question's the same for all of our guests. It's, what's done up real good for you?
Well, thanks to Judith, we have a Roku on our TV. Mm-hmm. And we have access to all of these channels. And I don't subscribe to as many channels as I used to, because I realized at some point it was a money drain and it was unrealistic. What am I going to do? Watch movies 24 hours a day? I'll never get my money's worth out of this. So I kind of rotate among them. And right now it's, Roku and Tubi. Because it's great. It's almost like going into a video store back in the day, where you're going, what the hell is this movie?
Yeah.
And you watch it. They arrange things in a way where it's like a bag of chips where you can't just eat one. Like last night, I really should have been getting a good night's sleep, but Judith and I put on Time After Time with Malcolm McDowell and David Warner and Mary Steenburgen, where H.G. Wells goes back in time to chase Jack the Ripper, who has used his time machine to escape. They land in San Francisco in 1979, and it's a really great movie, and it's written and directed by the guy who did the two very best Star Trek films, The Wrath of Khan and The Undiscovered Country, Nicholas Meyer. Judith fell asleep before the end of it, but I stuck it out. I'd seen it decades ago. And the next movie in the queue was Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeve, which is another time travel movie. And I ended up watching about half of that. And then I said, I got to turn this off because I'm going to watch all of this. And then it's,
yeah.
Then I'm a goner tomorrow and I got to be on this podcast. But yeah, just, the choices that are available, go off brand with your streaming. There's good stuff. Obviously, there's good stuff on Max. Disney, I feel like I've burned through everything that they have to offer. It's like there's not a lot of new stuff there that interests me. And I still have HBO Max, formerly HBO Max.
We'll just cycle through all the names there.
There's a little Turner Classic Movies subcategory on Max, and it's good. And I love the Criterion channel, but it's a little overwhelming there sometimes. It's fewer choices on TCM, but they're really great, the selections. So that's what I would suggest to this audience.
Yeah, great. I think Donovan, one of our co-hosts, found Too Many Beavers on Tubi once and watched
hundreds of beavers.
Yeah, something like that.
Hundreds of beavers. That's a great
beavers.
film. That's an example of, like, I gave that one 4 stars. That one is great. That's a great comedy. And again, an example of the thing what I was saying earlier. You don't need a lot of money to make a great movie. They didn't spend that much on this movie. It's all done like with really rudimentary tools, and they lean into it. That's the key.
Right.
That's the key, is don't try to get the audience to accept that something looks better than it does. Just show the thing and let that be what it is. And in a Wes Anderson movie, when you see the Grand Budapest Hotel, and it's obviously half model, half painting.
Oh, yeah.
And it's fine.
Yeah.
This is the kind of movie, the movie has told you, I am the kind of movie where it's okay that it's a model.
Yeah.
Hundreds of Beavers is that way. Like, all the animals are guys, the beavers are all guys in beaver suits, and they have these buck teeth that are clearly made out of cardboard. And you can see them when they turn around, you see the zipper in their back.
Yeah.
And that's actually funnier. Like, a totally realistic beaver would not be funny.
That's right.
When you watch the Three Stooges, if there's a scene where Moe and Curly are on a seesaw, and Curly jumps on the end of the seesaw and Moe flies up in the air, and they cut to a wide shot of what's clearly a dummy with a Moe wig.
Yeah.
That's funnier. That's funnier than
funny.
If they had a really realistic stunt double who did a realistic fall, that it would just be horrifying. It wouldn't be funny.
You'd be concerned, right?
Sometimes the cheap and or unrealistic alternative is the best,
Yeah.
So,
Which
anyway,
you can find those on Tubi, those recently mentioned.
Yeah, well, and also MeTV, I got to mention, we still have cable. Which not too many channels we watch, but MeTV, which is like pre-1990s TV. They got like Perry Mason and Twilight Zone and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and the original Star Trek and the original Batman and things like that, and old cartoons. Tom and Jerry.
Are those the kinds of things that you remember from childhood, or is that kind of your range there?
Some of them are, but some of them are things I've never actually watched.
Okay.
Like, I like to discover something new. There was a TV series called Naked City, which was on in the 50s, obviously like way predating my existence. And it was on DVD, and I bought the DVD and I absolutely loved it. And that's another pleasure, is finding something that you didn't really know anything about, and that is from another time, and that you think is going to not speak to you because it's from another time. And then you watch it and go, oh my God, this does speak to me.
Yeah.
That's fun. So, well, thank you.
Yes.
I really want to thank you for having me on here. This has been great.
I want to thank you for your time. For our viewers and listeners, please visit Matt Zoller Seitz on Roger Ebert, on New York Magazine, mainly Vulture, was where you'll see his writing if you go online. And of course, his own site, which is mzs.press.com. And we'll have those links in the show notes so that they're easy to click on. And we might put his Blue Sky account there. Great. So that you can get real people and not bots, real fans.
There you go.
Thanks again, Matt. And it's been an honor and entertaining as well.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.